Alrighty, lads, so you want to learn what it is to be the worst vampire bloodline possible, the Blood Dragons. You see, the reason why I say these are the worst vampire bloodline to be is for a number of reasons. Mainly their recruitment, and of course, their negligence of some of their powers. But before all that, let's begin with the history. How exactly did the Blood Dragons come to be? Well, you see, it all starts with Lamia. You may have seen a bit of a pattern here with all these bloodlines, is that they all start with Lamia, with Neferata being the first vampire. Well, she had this amazing warrior. He was an amazing general. He was awesome in every way, shape, and form. But he had human limitations, just like everyone else. So Neferata, pretty much in a rapey sort of way, forced vampirism onto Abarash. And Abarash became, well, the first of many vampires. But with Abarash's new gifts, he came with the startling realization that he needed to feast on flesh. He did not like this. He hated, and I mean hated, what he had become. He also hated pretty much all the other vampires equally because they bathed in blood. They loved it. They were like, man, this feeling, this sensuality of feasting on mortals is just amazing. But Abarash hated this. He had a strict code of honor. Here he is trying to defend the city, yet drinking its inhabitants, it didn't sit well with him. So, Abarash simply tried his longest to abstain from drinking. And many of the vampires in the court just kept mocking him, saying he's a fool, and also that he is a waste of the gift Neferata has given him, because here it is, he's letting himself decay. Well, being starved for so long, as we talked about the Strigoi, you start to kind of lose your sanity, but you also do decay a little bit. Abarash eventually fell into a blood frenzy. And by going into a blood frenzy, he awoke to have found that he killed far more people and drank far more blood than he would have had he just simply drank a few peasants every now and then. To which, again, he was kind of mocked and laughed at for being such a fool. So honorous and chivalrous. What a fool. He ended up causing more damage following his code of honor than he could have been if he just simply listened. But Abarash still strung to his code, his own chivalrous deeds. Here, though, we start to see something interesting. With the fall of Lamia, Abarash fled. He was so relieved to see the city fall. He hated that he failed his duty. Don't get me wrong, he is honor-bound, and he is seeing it as a failure on his part. But it's a failure he could live with. To see all those vampires with their decadence flee in terror, it was something that he actually more or less agreed with. He's like, yeah, we are monsters. We should have gotten destroyed. So him fleeing as well, somehow surviving in the desert, he of course stumbles across more warriors. Some of the interesting ones is that he comes across Bretonnian knights, he comes across Empire knights. This is mostly when the Empire and Bretonnia are invading Araby. But Abarash sees them, and he sees how chivalrous they are, how honorable they are. And he sees them getting killed by Arabian assassins, by poison darts. He just looks at this and goes, this is such a waste of such fine soldiers. These are amazing individuals. And yet they're dying to cowards. They're dying to nothing but piss. Well, let me spread what gift I can to them. So he would take the injured knights who proven themselves in his eyes as honorable people and bestow them the blood kiss. Now, Abarash wasn't really much of a sire per se. He didn't really stick around for these people. But they did learn enough about Abarash that the people who are now the Blood Knights were able to understand that honor is important. But something more interestingly is that Abarash would always be found defending areas against vampires, defending areas against chaos. he would always be on the side of good, which is very interesting. After all, we talked about the Vampiro, which if you haven't seen that video yet, I'd highly recommend it, where he slays pretty much many vampires, and he saves Talea and Astalia, because again, he is against non-chivalrous methods. But Aberash himself, what made him get some of his titles like Lord of Blood, the Blood Dragon, and this is what earned his bloodline's name, the Blood Dragon, was Aberash always looked for the greatest threat that he could possibly face. He didn't care what it was. Massive orc warlord on top of a wyvern? Cool. How about a giant dwarf lord? Cool. Ogres? Awesome. Anything. Well, eventually he came across a dragon, and dragons are among the most deadliest things you could come across. So for days he was fighting this dragon, and finally when he won, he drank its blood. And here he found something marvelous. By drinking a dragon's blood, it cures a vampire of their need to thirst at all. Aberash was cured. He was freed from his curse. Now he could just be a constant immortal undead lord who didn't need to feed on peasants, didn't need to commit dishonorable deeds. And upon which he passed this on to his children, his own vampire underlings, that, hey, this is what you should do. You should hone your strength. You should hone your mastery of blade, spear, horse charging. You should master these traits. And then try your own martial prowess against a dragon and drink its blood to be free of your curse. This is something that the Blood Dragons have adopted as their name, but something that they have adopted in their core. Something that is interesting, though, is that many Blood Dragons do fight honorably. They prefer a straight up fight. But just because they may be alone doesn't mean that they're helpless. In fact, there's been more than enough of militia who surround a Blood Knight and are actually able to hurt him, to the point that he shows his true power, which is mastery of the undeath. They could summon minions at their disposal. Now, of course, it's known in their codex that their magic is not quite that good, and the reason why is because they don't care. They're not someone who sits there reading books all day on how to master the arts of necromancy. They just use what latent powers are in their blood, and they summon whatever they can. It's much like a Strigoi in many ways. It's the reason why I like Strigoi so much. Strigois are monsters. They have honor, they have nobility, but they are monsters. The Blood Knights are a bit more sophisticated, but then that raises the question, are they still monsters? Well, they're able to blend in easier. Appearance-wise, they look fine. And then the way they fight is more human than beast, like the Strigoi. A Strigoi would never use a weapon. They use their claws, they use their magic. They're pretty much brutes. So that's really what kind of separates the two bloodlines, but that's not much of a difference, to be honest. Something that's very interesting too is that with every bloodline, the more and more you pass on the blood kiss, the weaker and weaker the generation gets. So in other words, if I am a von Karstein and I pass my bloodline, the person who is now passed to, they will not be able to be as strong magically or physically as I am. And then the person that he passes it on to would be less than half as strong as I am magically and physically. So this is something that all the bloodlines have to be aware of. The Blood Dragons don't seem to have this issue, and that's very unique because they are very widespread. They spread their blood kiss like an STD in a barracks. They go around giving it to everybody. But what's interesting is that every single Blood Dragon is pretty much the same. They all don't have any deficits. Now, this could be for a few reasons. Some people think it's just the gift of the Blood Dragons, where by their own creator drinking a dragon's blood, it has been able to somehow purify this process. Others simply think that it's the people that they recruit. So let's talk about that. What do blood dragons recruit? They always recruit knights. They recruit chivalrous, honorable warriors. So if you're recruiting a guy who was, let's say, a paladin, he's able to go toe-to-toe with a Strigoi in his normal life. He's able to go toe-to-toe with Chaos Knights. But now you're giving him undeath. You're going to make him extremely strong. So then it becomes a question of, well, if that's the case, is it really the bloodline that's making them strong? Or is it just that these people were already strong and the bloodline is so diluted that it's not really helping them much? It's giving them small benefits at best. It's hard to say. I mean, to me, I like to think that on one hand, yeah, the bloodline probably is pure because of Aberash's deeds as an honorable individual. Maybe the good deeds that he's done has purified this process. Maybe drinking the blood of a dragon actually does pass on a bit of that dragon blood into the next vampire. Who knows? But it is an idea many people throw around there, is that it's very interesting how a necrarch, who is insanely powerful, capable of summoning an entire legion under his command, will pass his bloodline, and the person who he passes it on to may only be able to summon maybe a platoon, maybe a quarter of that army. And then the person that guy passes on to is only able to raise maybe a squad, and that's it. So the bloodline obviously gets diluted. But the blood dragons, we just don't see this. What's also interesting is that the blood dragons, although being chivalrous and honorable in their own ways, they do infiltrate. They're not above deception. They're not above illusion. This is why I have a video of knights charging into battle, is because there's been many times where a knight is not actually human, but is a well-disguised blood dragon, and they are yet the commander of a knightly order, and other knights will have no clue. So it makes the Empire a little bit more hesitant when they see a knight perform extremely well in battle. It starts to make the witch hunter unholster their pistol. Is this knight really amazing, like Sigmar? Or is this knight holding secrets? Is there something else to his inhumane prowess in combat? Like, why is this knight commanding his troops to be in some weird formation? Is it because he's a genius and he found a formation that counters the enemy? Or is he so old and so ancient that he's using a formation that I've only seen the Tomb Kings use? Hint, hint, this guy could be a vampire. Though the Empire is a bit hesitant to go around killing such valuable assets. I mean, after all, if he's not killing his own knights and he's actually helping the Empire, what's the harm? And that's where we get to Blood Keep. Blood Keep was a knightly order itself, and it fell because it was infiltrated and every single knight became a vampire. Well, when it was discovered, the Empire tried to wipe them out, and it took them 3 years of prolonged engagement to finally lay siege to this city. Well, it's not really a city, it's more of a castle, but the way that it took them so damn long, you would have thought it was a city. And the Empire had never faced such a strong force before. These knights fight just with insane knowledge that no human could ever comprehend. After all, the leader of the Blood Knights could be thousands of years old. Here he is, he's fought dwarves, he's fought elves, he's fought who knows what, Skaven, orcs, and they've probably traveled around too. So you're not dealing with novice generals. You're dealing with someone who knows what they're doing. And here you are with a 40-year-old man who's your general, and he only knows one way to deal with a solution. It's pretty obvious how bad that's going to get. And then to make it worse, they don't mind using magic. They hate it, they don't like it, but they will to even the odds. They'll charge in, drinking everyone's blood while they're killing everybody. And then on top of it, they'll be summoning undead as barriers to make things even longer. This is the reason why I have these videos looped, is so you can keep seeing how a Blood Knight would more or less act in some areas. They would bundle up, charge through the enemy forces with their insane strength, but just because they're alone doesn't mean they're helpless. They'll summon zombies to even the odds. They'll summon all sorts of nasty creations. To make things even worse, they can heal themselves with their blood magic. In fact, it's a trait that they put in Warhammer 3 that I'm very happy they put, with the hunger mechanic, where they actually heal in combat as they deal damage. So you're not dealing with some run-of-the-mill knight. You're dealing with a knight who heals himself and has the strength to literally throw a man off of his horse and throw the horse at him at the same time. But this is all in all combined to say that they are probably the worst bloodline when it comes to, well, the sheer recruitment and then their onerous ways. You see, the von Karsteins, they're able to summon armies and then use their agents and use their wicked ways to more or less take over the empire. The Necrarchs are able to use their vast magical resources to create all sorts of nasty deeds and then again take over the empire. The Lamian Sisterhood are able to influence politics by infiltrating every noble's court, so they can convince the empire to go take care of a threat for them. Very powerful tool indeed. The Strigoi, though, the Strigoi and the Blood Dragons, they're kind of tied. And the only difference between the two is that the Blood Dragons are out there. They can go wherever the hell they please. But the Strigoi can't. Strigoi have to hide. But a Strigoi has something that a Blood Dragon doesn't have. This intense need of honor, this intense chivalrous deed, and then these restrictions on who they pass their blood kiss to. You see, the Blood Dragons kind of handicap themselves. And it's something I would love to see, is I would love to see a Blood Dragon rise who actually does master necromancy. A Blood Dragon who rises and is able to actually carve out a name for himself. It would be a cool story to see, especially in the Warhammer Old World that they're starting to develop, where we get this one-hand Blood Dragon who's not normal, where he actually doesn't have chivalry or honor. He kind of sheds those away because he sees the limitations it's imposing on his bloodline, and then he just carves out this amazing underground empire where he's able to take over huge swaths of Skaven, orcs, dwarves, and he's able to do some nasty deeds before he quickly falls. Besides that, this has been Free 700. I hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys next time.